Picture this. You're walking down a bustling street in medieval times and suddenly, a bucket of waste splashes onto the cobbles in front of you. Welcome to the reality of sanitation in the Middle Ages. It's a world away from the sanitized, clean realities we're used to today. From the highest king to the lowest peasant, personal hygiene was a luxury, not a given. The act of relieving oneself was tedious, involving the removal of multiple layers of clothing, often conducted in public without a second thought. Streets doubled as communal bathrooms, and the concept of personal space was virtually non-existent when it came to bodily functions. Cleaning up after oneself? Rarely considered. Hand washing? An oddity. Children, blissfully unaware, would contaminate communal areas without even thinking about it, their unwashed hands touching food and people alike. So, buckle up, because we're about to dive into a day in the life of a medieval person from dawn to dusk. As the sun rises, our medieval individual begins their day, and just like us, they have to answer nature's call. In the Middle Ages, starting the day was a little more complicated than our modern roll out of bed and shuffle to the bathroom. Clothing, particularly for the nobility, was elaborate and cumbersome, including layers of tunics, hose, and undergarments. Imagine the challenge of having to attend to nature's call while wrestling with a tunic, belt, and perhaps even a suit of armor if you're a knight. Moreover, privacy was not a given during these times. Castles, manor houses, and even peasant huts often had communal living and sleeping areas, with little to no separation for personal activities. This lack of privacy extended to bathroom habits. While the wealthy might have had private garderobes, small rooms with a hole in the floor leading to a cesspit, most people had to make do with communal latrines or even just the great outdoors. For men and women alike, defecation and urination were facts of life, dealt with as a community. The boundaries we consider inviolable today were often blurred in the Middle Ages, with people answering nature's call in close proximity to their neighbors. And then there was the issue of cleaning up. Medieval folks didn't have the luxury of toilet paper or bidets. Instead, they used what was readily available: leaves, moss, or even just their hand. Washing up afterward was not always a given, as clean water was often a precious commodity. So as we can see, the morning routines of our medieval ancestors were a far cry from our own. The simple act of answering nature's call was an ordeal in itself, fraught with challenges and devoid of the comforts and conveniences we take for granted today. With the morning routine done, it's time to face the day, and the sanitation challenges it brings. Walking through the bustling streets, the sights, sounds, and smells of medieval life are everywhere, including the very public nature of defecation and urination. In the Middle Ages, personal space and boundaries were different from what we know today. The streets were a communal space, and the acts of urination and defecation were part of everyday life. There was no shame or discomfort attached to it, as it was a necessity, like eating or sleeping. Imagine being a knight or a peasant clad in layers of clothing. The process of simply removing these garments to relieve oneself was far from easy. It was often more convenient to find a quiet spot in the alleyway or behind a building than to fumble with layers of clothing and risk being caught off guard in a vulnerable position. The concept of public sanitation as we know it today was virtually non-existent. People would defecate and urinate in streets, alleys, and even in the corners of marketplaces. These practices were not limited to men. Women too were part of these historical defecation rituals. And what about after? Well, the idea of washing hands or cleaning up was virtually unknown. People would carry on with their day, touching food, objects, and other individuals, spreading germs and diseases without a second thought. Children, who are naturally curious and oblivious to the concept of hygiene, would often contribute to the problem. After relieving themselves, they would continue their play, touching food and people with unwashed hands, thus further contaminating their surroundings. This lack of personal hygiene and public sanitation was part of the fabric of medieval life. The norms and practices around public defecation and urination were deeply ingrained in society, and people saw no reason to change them. And after such activities, the idea of washing hands is a foreign concept. The concept of personal hygiene and cleanliness as we understand it today was a luxury, an idea that was yet to be born in the minds of medieval people. Children, innocent and carefree, are also part of this sanitation nightmare. Their small hands, constantly exploring the world around them, play a significant role in the spread of germs and diseases. Let's dive into the grim reality of children's hygiene practices in the medieval era. Without the knowledge of germ theory that we possess today, children in the Middle Ages had no concept of how their bathroom habits could affect their health and that of those around them. After urinating or defecating, these young ones would go about their day, touching people, animals, and most notably, food, with unwashed hands. Imagine this. A child in the throes of play pauses to answer nature's call, right there in the open, as was common practice. Then, without a second thought, they return to their game, their hands now a vehicle for germs and bacteria. These same hands later reach for a piece of bread at mealtime, effectively contaminating the food. And it wasn't just food. These children, in their innocence, would touch their parents, siblings, and playmates. In a society where personal space was a foreign concept, this close contact meant that germs could easily spread from one person to another like wildfire. The lack of personal hygiene was not limited to the lower classes. Even the children of nobility, despite their elevated status, were not educated on the importance of cleanliness. Their bathroom habits were no different from those of peasant children. They too would defecate, urinate, and then go about their day, blissfully unaware of the microscopic hazards they were spreading. In a world where survival was often a daily struggle, hygiene took a back seat. The focus was on finding food, staying warm, and protecting oneself from physical threats. The invisible threats posed by poor sanitation were not understood and thus were largely ignored. The lack of personal hygiene standards is a common thread in the fabric of medieval daily life. It tethered together all classes from the lowly peasant to the lofty noble, and was a silent player in the high mortality rates of the time. Children, with their carefree ways and unwashed hands, were unwitting accomplices in this grim tale of medieval sanitation. These practices didn't just affect individuals, they had a profound impact on society as a whole. The medieval era's lack of sanitation wasn't just an inconvenience. It was a ticking time bomb for public health. Imagine a world where diseases could spread unchecked, spurred on by the filth and squalor that marked the streets and homes of medieval towns. Without the understanding of germs and the importance of cleanliness that we have today, people often fell victim to diseases that were easily preventable by modern standards. The plague, cholera, typhoid fever, these were only a few of the deadly illnesses that ran rampant, their spread facilitated by the unsanitary conditions. The consequences didn't stop at physical health. The psychological impact of living in such conditions was profound. The constant threat of disease, the smell, the filth, all of these would have taken a toll on the mental well-being of the people. And let's not forget the social implications. With public defecation and urination the norm, the concept of personal space was virtually non-existent. This lack of boundaries had a significant impact on social dynamics, affecting everything from interpersonal relationships to societal hierarchies. The role of women was particularly affected, with tasks such as cleaning and caring for the sick often falling to them. They were disproportionately exposed to the consequences of poor sanitation. This further entrenched gender inequalities and shaped societal norms. Even the economy was impacted. With so many people falling ill, productivity suffered. And with no effective system in place to manage waste, cities were less appealing, hampering trade and growth. So, the next time you're tempted to complain about modern inconveniences, spare a thought for the people of the Middle Ages. They navigated a world where the basic act of relieving oneself was fraught with danger and discomfort, and where the consequences of poor sanitation rippled out to touch every aspect of life. It's a grim picture, but it was the reality for people living in the Middle Ages. If this brief journey into medieval sanitation has intrigued you, there's a book that dives even deeper. It's a treasure trove of information, shedding light on the unspoken and often grim realities of defecation practices in the Middle Ages for both males and females. It's a fascinating read, filled with vivid descriptions and historical context that will transport you back in time. You'll discover the intricate rituals and societal norms that govern these personal tasks, from kings to knights to peasants. To grab your copy, simply follow the link in the description. It's a journey you won't forget. And if you've enjoyed this dive into the past, our channel is brimming with more historical explorations. From the mundane to the extraordinary, we uncover the forgotten facets of daily life throughout the ages. So why not join us for the ride? Remember, knowledge is power, even when it's about medieval bathroom habits. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more fascinating insights into the past.